All right, we are recording, I believe.
Mhm.
All right. Diane, did you have anything else?
We're good. No, we just want to welcome everyone. Good morning. Thank you for being here. And of course, we're going to be focusing on universal design for early learning, I call it. Kevin Schaefer, who is here, he's Director of Equity Inclusion Practices from SELPA. And he is working with the Supporting Inclusive Practices SIP project, and been extremely lucky to be able to connect with Kevin to bring this training. It's the quality of training is so much better than anything that I've seen up to this point, Kevin. So just really glad that you're here.
Got a high bar, Diane.
So let's all welcome Kevin. Thank you for joining us again.
It's a pleasure to be here on Saturday morning. So thank you for joining us. Universal Design for Learning for Early Learning is one of my passions. So when Diane asked if we would be able to present on this topic, we jumped at the chance. Even though it was Saturday, we are so happy to be able to present the information. We're going to do a little bit of a review from the end of the first presentation for anyone who wasn't able to attend that one. We're just going to go back over a little bit of the information around the UDL framework, and then we're going to jump into a deeper dive with each of the principles, checkpoints, and guidelines. So we started with equity norms. For everyone who is online currently, have a vision for how you can use this information in your classroom, in your lesson design, to promote access and equity for all of your students. Be a learner, not a finisher. We will not close all of the loops. You will still have questions. Universal Design for Learning is a framework that is always in motion and you're always improving. My one recommendation is to start off really, really slow. Pick an area, focus on that area to improve in around that Universal Design for Learning framework. And I watched the recording last time, and Diane made a really, really good point. Because you're preschool teachers, you already do a lot of, most of, Universal Design for Learning. This presentation is to really put into context how you plan around engagement, how you represent information for all students to access and understand it, as well as multiple options for students to express themselves in the way they best express themselves. You do that already. Now it's just putting it into that context of the principles of UDL. Lean into struggle. We might talk about hard things or things that you may not be able to connect at this point, but I think when we come back for the third presentation, it'll make even more sense. Feed your passion, do fun things. I tried to make this presentation interactive, as well as giving multiple ways to learn. So we utilize the Universal Design for Learning framework in the design of the presentation. Own your education, invest in yourself, take the information that I present, and if you can use it in your classroom, that's really our goal, is to deepen our understanding and then apply that in the educational setting. And then own your culture. Help others grow. I don't know if you're all individual on the call or you're with your teams, but if others have questions that you can help with, create that access and equitable culture within your program with your students, as well as your families and your coworkers. So just a little review of the entire series on October 30th. We did an overview of Universal Design for Learning, but in the umbrella of inclusion and how to create equitable, meaningful, inclusive environments so that all students are able to be successful within your classrooms, but not just in the preschool setting, but it also sets the students up to be successful in inclusive kindergarten through secondary programs. One of the, in the research, one of the facts that has emerged is that when students are placed in segregated environments in preschool, typically they remain in segregated or self-contained environments throughout the rest of their career. So it's important that we create those accessible environments in preschool, but then we also have to scale that through the entire educational system. So October 30th was really a quick overview of Universal Design for Learning guidelines and framework. This presentation will go a little bit deeper into the principles, guidelines, the checkpoints, variability of learners, how to move the UDL framework into creating expert learners. And then on February 12th, we're really going to get into the core of Universal Design for Learning, and that's lesson planning. And in our lesson planning, by utilizing the information that we'll cover today, we're able to identify and mitigate potential barriers for our students in our lesson planning, so that we're before any instruction, before the students experience the environment, it's already been set up for them so that they're able to access and understand and engage with the world around them in their classrooms. Awesome. So any questions about October 30th, December 11th, or February 12th? This is kind of the overview, and we're right in that center, December 11th. Okay. Please make sure you use the chat if you have any questions. Diane will stop me. I'd prefer to answer questions as we go through the presentation. Otherwise, I get distracted and down another path and can never remember and go back and answer the question fully. Just as last time, I've created a Padlet for you, and Diane, if you can put the link in the chat. A Padlet is just a resource board that you click on any of the icons on the screen, and it will take you to that link, or it will open up the opportunity to download that document. So we sent out some pre-service resources before the October 30th presentation. And then in pink are all of the resources that we covered in the last presentation. You have the recorded webinar if you'd like to go back and review any of the information presented, as well as the PowerPoint and note-taking. And then the resources in the videos that were utilized. The one thing that I do want to point out is in that center pink column, you'll see the preschool planning tool. That was one of the resources that we reviewed and gave you some opportunities to explore that. And that is the resource that is related directly to the preschool learning foundations, where you can choose the learning foundation that you're lesson planning for. And then you can also access goals and strategies and social, emotional, and behavioral expectations that would link directly to that preschool learning foundation. So that's one of the resources that we'll keep coming back to. And the resources that we talk about today, of which there will be 3, are directly linked back to that preschool planning tool. And then in green are all of the resources that we'll cover today. So you have the PowerPoint that I'm going through. You have the opportunity to download a note-taking guide. If that helps you to learn or retain the information, just go to the Padlet, click on the notes, and then you can download it and print it out and type it or write on it. And then we have the resources. There's an article, UDL and preschool, that you'll review today, as well as 3 really, really cool resources: the Learner Variability Project, the UDL Live Binder, and the UDL Preschool Learning Foundations that have been color-coded into the UDL engagement, representation, and action expression colors. And then finally, we have a video via Mr. Jensen that we'll see at the end. Any questions, Diane? Nope. Okay. All right.
I'm good.
So one of the foundational components of Universal Design for Learning is to ensure that students are being educated in a safe environment, to bring down that that emotional component so that it opens up space for them to actually learn and experience their environment at a deep level. So I'd like you to reflect. You can see the different weather types on the left. Think about how you are today. Are you shiny and happy? Are you a little windblown from all of the events from the last week, etc.? And since we all experience changes in our moods throughout the day, our students do the same. You know, if you have a student that's a morning student, they're ready to go in the morning. By the time they leave, they are tapped out and ready to take their nap. So pick one of those weather types on the left. Keep it in your head. All right, so in consideration of your current mood, What would it be if your emotion were a weather type? And then also think about what's the last thing that you ate. What is the last thing that you ate? And then type your name, your new name in the chat box. So the weather type becomes your first name, the last food that you ate be your last name. And let's see how we are doing today. So I would be Sunny Coffee, for example. Okay. Just a little fun activity to get us started. Sunny cereal.
Yeah.
Shiny water.
Cloudy eggs.
Windy pear. We got some happy people online today. Cloudy orange chicken. Cloudy hash browns. I love it. Sunny hot cocoa. Maria's warm today. She's sunny and hot cocoa. Awesome. Sunny oatmeal. So you might ask yourself, what does this have to do with universal design for learning? With UDL, it's explicitly planning for students' environments so that it's safe, it's reflective of who they are, of their cultures, of their ethnicities, so that they're reflected and they own the environment in which they're being taught. Far too often, and with my background in special education, I see students on IEPs who view the educational setting as threatening, as unsafe. And when we have that fight or flight mindset, we are unable to cognitively progress or move forward. So a core component of universal design for learning is ensuring that the learning environment is welcoming, that it's built on relationship, and it allows for students to explore and make mistakes. And you're probably reflecting, yeah, that's what we have to do in preschool. So this is just for your own context, just understanding the importance of creating an environment of belonging, of community, of relationship is at the core of students being engaged in their environment. So in the chat, what do you hope to learn today? What is your learning goal for understanding and utilizing the UDL framework in your work? So I'll give you just a couple minutes to reflect on that, because in our next presentation, we're going to talk about the learning goal as the first step in lesson planning and making sure that that learning goal is set, but the means for getting there is flexible. So what is your learning goal today? What are you hoping for when you leave? So, supporting lesson plan development ideas. Improve indoor environment for more engagement and self-directed learning. You know, Amy, that self-directed learning, really keep that in mind as we go through today, because that is really one of the core components of UDL, is ensuring that students have opportunities to learn about themselves and how they learn in the educational environment. So allowing students to be self-directed is core to universal design for learning. Let's see if we can get a couple more. Learning driven by them. Just a couple more. I love that there's a theme of transference of ownership and learning to students instead of teachers creating a one-size-fits-all. Knowledge and support in active hands-on role for the teachers to use. Simple, quick, and easy implement strategies. Stacy, remember to go back to that preschool planning tool from the first presentation. Ideas to be implemented in an inclusive environment. Awesome. When we get to that learner variability navigator, Rosalina, I think that's going to be what you're looking for. Okay, really, really good learning goals. I think we're going to hit the target on a number of them. So I have a quick blog that I think, Diane, if you can put in the chat, it'll be a link that will take you to the article. What I'd like you to do is just take about 3 or 4 minutes go ahead and read it, but also jot down your ahas or how you might be able to take what you've learned and utilize it in the classroom. And then we'll put you in breakout sessions of about 3 to 4, just to have a little bit of discussion to share out and maybe deepen your learning by getting other ideas. Okay, Diane, is it in the chat?
Yes, it is. I actually put the entire list of links in the chat for you there, Kevin.
Okay, so it's the UDL blog link. If everybody can go there, we will come back at 9:33. Okay.
Nice.
All right, thumbs up or thumbs down if you've had enough time or need more time. We good to go to breakout rooms?
Do you want to show a thumbs up, you guys? Are we ready for breakout rooms to discuss?
Okay. Okay, we're going to go into breakout rooms with your team. Just discuss what impression did it have? What did you learn? What questions? What aha moments did you have? And then we'll come back and we'll share out. Okay, let me get you into your breakout rooms.
And let's make sure that we're keeping our cameras on as you're in your breakout rooms and during the training too. Thank you.
Okay, rooms are open.
Hi, I didn't get placed in a breakout room.
Well, let me get you in one.
Thank you.
Hmm. Linda, I'm looking for your name. I don't see it. There you go, Linda. I put you in room 7. You have to hover over your name and then it'll ask you to go.
progress. Sorry. Sorry, Betty.
All right, looks like everyone's coming back. Slowly coming back. There we go.
Oh, sorry.
I think we are all back. We've got 23. Would anyone like to unmute? And what was the discussion in your breakout room? Were there new learnings? Were there questions? Were there ahas? Any information you can take back to your classroom, or just an overall deepening of your understanding of UDL?
This is Mary. We're in our group, we were discussing how this what we're learning and what we read, how we were talking about how important it is that how when kids are coming back from being gone for a long time because of the pandemic, and how when they came back, I felt like, that they kind of had fallen behind a little bit, and how stressful it was for some of them just to, come back to the classrooms, and how we as teachers, get that, and we understand that, and how do we help them, feel safe about coming back, and just to I guess we're talked also we're discussing about how our curriculum has how we have to change it a little bit, not just to include to do the everyday things, the weekly themes, but just to include also curriculum to help children to bounce back, to feel safe, and to have really good days.
And that's why we started, especially in our current environment in which students are already stressed, parents are stressed, students are feeling the stress of the parents. That's why we started with that emotional component. And I think when we get into that learner variability navigator resource, it will direct you into very specific activities that address social emotional learning. So when we get there, I'll give you some time to really explore it so you can deepen your understanding and utilize it more effectively. So good points. Anyone else? One more share out if we can.
This is me and Rosalina. And in my group, I also talk about what teacher Mary mentioned about, I see how this pandemic has affected our children as well as we adults. There is a lot of social and emotional work that we need to do. Yeah.
Yeah, agreed. And I think it's the perfect time for Diane to have requested this presentation on universal design for learning, because it does address specifically that social emotional equity, access, students with disabilities, English language learners, and making sure that students have that safe environment and can free up the space in order to actually learn and benefit from the information that you're presenting to them. So I did want to get into that deeper dive of universal design for learning, which is based on the universal design for architecture that we talked about last time. And the whole idea that when we plan for students or individuals who are in the margins, we're actually planning for everyone to benefit. So for example, the yellow raised dots that signal and the curb cuts that signal that there's a cross crosswalk coming, with those curb cuts, it allows for access, or was designed for access, of individuals in wheelchairs. But actually everyone utilizes curb cuts, joggers, parents who are pushing strollers, people who have an injury, maybe a short-term injury like a broken leg, all benefit from that design that was initially utilized for individuals in wheelchairs. So when we talk about access, allowing for or planning for access of individual needs is where universal design for learning is rooted. I think about the push to open the doors. It used to be that we just had a handle. Well, who are we excluding from the goal of walking through the door? So by push to open, we have FedEx, who have their hands full of packages, are able to lean into it. The door that might be really heavy, younger children might be able to push the button and access, even though it was designed for individuals who might be in wheelchairs. One of my favorite cartoons, the student in the wheelchair says, "Can you please shovel the ramp?" And the custodian says, "All these other kids are waiting to use the stairs. When I get through shoveling them off, then I will clear the ramp for you. But if you shovel the ramp, we can all get in." So really that proactive design, where we design for specific purposes, is actually utilizing that accessibility feature for everyone. So when we bring that into the classroom with universal design for learning, that same mindset is in our planning process, that we plan for students who are typically on the margins, and then allow everyone to access if they need or want or learn better, utilizing that support. And that's really where we exist, or where we focus our attention when we implement universal design for learning. We're asking ourselves, is our learning environment accessible to everyone? Or who are we excluding in our lesson design or the environment that we've created, which is based on that universal design for architecture. But you'll notice in the definition in the upper left-hand corner, it's the proactive design. What we're trying to avoid is the reteaching. From an architectural perspective, it's retrofitting. So we build, the building, for example, or the structure, and then we have to go back, and it takes more time and energy and money to retrofit that building or that environment. Same thing with universal design for learning. What we're trying to avoid is reteaching. We want to, as much as possible, address those potential barriers for all students. We want to mitigate those barriers so that all students, from the first delivery of our instruction, all students will have as much access as possible. There's also the idea of flexibility in the way information is presented, the way students respond, as well as the way students are engaged, because students will understand information that's presented in different ways. They will express their level of knowledge in different ways. They'll be engaged in different ways. So when we understand this idea of variability of learners and we plan for that, that's where the flexibility comes in, where we're opening the doors for all students by reducing the barriers or potential barriers in our instruction. Okay, and we're talking about all students, students who struggle, students who come to the class with high anxiety, our English language learners, etc. And that's that variability that we're going to start with. We talked a little bit last time about universal design for learning is not a curriculum or a toolbox, but it's a mindset, it's a framework, which is why we're spending this entire presentation on understanding the framework so that you can create a context when you're doing your lesson planning and instructional delivery. It's proactive, it's not specific to students with disabilities, but for all learners, even those that come to the classroom prepared and really functioning educationally at a high level. It's for all students in a universal tier 1 level of support across all settings. A lot of times we only focus on the classroom. It's really every setting that students experience throughout their day. And I just included a couple links. One is the link to CAST, which is the hub or the organization that puts out all of the universal design for learning information and resources. And then the graphic on the right what they've done that's really, really cool, and it's part of your Padlet from the first presentation, is interactive UDL guidelines. So if you want more information on any of the components of that framework, you can click on that link within the graphic, and it will take you to more research, more resources, and how to implement the Universal Design for Learning guidelines. So that, like I said, is from your first presentation. So we're going to get into some vocabulary and some components of Universal Design for Learning. The first is learner variability that we've been talking about. Just as we have physical variability, there's also variability in the ways and the levels at which and the speed at which students learn. They have different variability of memory, of language, of knowledge, their reading levels. So if we know that there is variability and variability is the norm, then we should be able to plan for that based on what we know about our students within the educational setting. And that variability goes from low to average to high. But the term that I really like is that there's this myth of average, that there's an average student, when in reality, every student has a jagged learning profile across the settings, across the context they experience, across the academic subjects, and the relationships that they're able to create with the adults in their classrooms. So by understanding learner variability as the norm and every student coming to the classroom with a jagged learning profile, when we create that flexibility, we're allowing for all jagged learning profiles to be included in our instruction. And there is no average brain, like we just talked about. Variability is the dominant feature of the nervous system, and like fingerprints, no two brains are alike. So when we deliver instruction as a one-size-fits-all, in too many cases, it's the way the teacher learns best. We're actually creating segregated, exclusive environments that impact students years beyond their preschool experience. You may be familiar with Katie Novak. I think we might have watched one of her videos previously. So we're going to watch, she gives a really great analogy with a buffet, but there's no single way a human brain will engage with, perceive, or act upon a task. And variability is predictable. What we can predict, we can plan for. So we're going to watch a quick video. If you have any thoughts or comments, go ahead and stick them in the chat.
People ask me all the time, what is UDL? UDL is Universal Design for Learning, and it is not a new name for differentiated instruction. There is a framework, Universal Design for Learning, and there is a framework, differentiated instruction. And although they can be used to complement each other, they are absolutely not the same thing. So let's talk about a little analogy that I like to use to explain the difference. Imagine for a moment that I was going to have a smashing dinner party. Now, if it was universally designed, I want to make sure that everybody is going to have an awesome meal at my party. And so I'm going to anticipate or predict the variability of possible guests. Now, as my best friends, you're all invited, and you're going to bring partners and friends, and I might not know exactly what they eat. But worry not, I can predict the variability. I'm going to predict that some people might be lactose intolerant, might be vegan or vegetarian, have cultural needs, or they might be picky eaters. And when I can predict this, I realize that it would be a really bad idea to serve a casserole, right? Because imagine you come into my party, you're thinking you're going to have an awesome time, boom, tuna noodle. Oh, I'm going to exclude a lot of people. But here's the thing. When I think universally, I recognize the importance of having different options and choices for everyone. And so when I universally design a party, I am going to serve a buffet. And the same thing happens in my classroom, is we can recognize and embrace the incredible variability of our students and identify the barriers that we know that some students face. And so if I recognize that I might have some students who struggle with language, some students who are decoding below grade level, some students who need additional challenges, I can create a buffet of ways for students to learn and share what they know using firm goals and flexible means. Now, differentiated instruction uses flexible groupings to make decisions about what specific students need. It's a great way to provide tier 2 support or additional intervention for your students. But when you plan using differentiated instruction, it can feel a little bit like you are a short order cook. If you're coming to my party and I say, I'm going to have to make something for the people who are lactose intolerant, and I have to have another dish for everyone who is vegan, and I want to make sure I have something gluten-free, I am now a short order cook and my kitchen is on fire. And here's the thing. You don't get to make choices for yourself. So we want to universally design instruction. We want to be really proactive and planful about identifying barriers and making sure that we're not reacting and providing additional dishes for every student. So the next time you feel a little frazzled and on fire with planning because you're worried about every single group of students, take a step back, identify some barriers, and make a flexible buffet and allow learners to self-differentiate and self-direct their learning. Because at a buffet, when everyone makes their own plate and you provide feedback and support those choices, I'm telling you, it is a much better party.
All right, I hope that was helpful in kind of deepening the understanding with that analogy with a buffet. And I know somebody put in the chat early on that one of their goals was to really look deeper at self-directed learning. So I'm not sure if you caught when Katie mentioned that by providing that buffet or the options, you're allowing students to be self-directed and understand how they learn best by making mistakes and having successes. So any comments, please put them in the chat if that was helpful to really differentiate between differentiated instruction and universal design for learning, because there is some confusion there. So I would love to hear in the chat if you have any comments or if it helped create that understanding. So the next resource that I wanted to make sure that you had just a few minutes to explore is the Learner Variability Navigator. And I'm going to stop share because I want to make sure that you do have that time to get the link. And Diana, if you can put the link in the chat, that would be awesome. And let me get in here. So you're going to go with that link. You're going to go to this website and it will take you to the Digital Promise. If you scroll down, it should put you on the page of the Learner Variability Navigator. You can scroll down and you can choose a model. You can identify student factors that you would like to address or plan for, and then you can get strategies. So I want to get started and I'm going to go into grades pre-K 2. I'm going to learn more. And then I can dive into that model by exploring factors. So these are all the factors that you have to choose from. And we talked a little bit about the current situation that students, with all the anxiety in the world, we can click any of these factors and you'll notice that they light up because they've related student background, social emotional learning, cognition, and numeracy and mathematics. So if I have a student that has adverse experiences, you can see all the other areas that are specifically related to adverse experience. You've got emotion, you've got sense of belonging, cognitive flexibility, etc. So I'll click on adverse learning experiences, and it will bring those exact same factors and give you a definition. And then you can learn more. Building blocks for learning, supporting students who have experienced trauma, etc. And they also have strategies. So these are all examples that address adverse learning experiences or strategies that you can implement or at least give you ideas within your planning process, okay? So I'm gonna give you just a few minutes to explore. It's pretty easy to navigate, but you're always looking for that learner variability navigator. And then with our math pre-K 2, you can learn more about that subject. You can learn factors, and then this will bring the strategies up for you. Oops. And you can filter, okay? So I'll give you like 5 minutes if Diana, if you put the link in the chat.
The link's in the chat.
Awesome. So go ahead and play around with this resource and think too about the preschool planning tool that we talked about in the first presentation and how they might connect, because that resource also has strategies that you might find beneficial. Was everybody able to access the resource, the Learner Variability Navigator? Awesome. Thank you, Linda. So it's a really great tool. It might take you know, a little playing around with it to really navigate it effectively, but it does bring in that social emotional cognitive student background component, and it's free, no cost, but tons of connections made between the variability of learners that they bring to the classroom. So I did want to get into the actual guidelines, the principles, the guidelines, and the checkpoints. So going back to our vocabulary, these are the three terms that are very specific to universal design for learning. And it's important that we understand what each one means, but then also how they relate back to the framework. So we are going to move forward. We talked a little bit about the, this is called the guidelines visual. And this is really the basis for universal design for learning and springboarding this information into lesson design. And again, the link to the interactive guidelines is at the bottom of the slide. So we have three principles. Each column is a principle. There's the principle of engagement, the principle of representation, and the principle of action and expression. And then within each principle, we have three guidelines. There's 9 guidelines in all, and they're related specifically to the principle, the color of the principle within which they are couched. And then within each guideline, we have very specific checkpoints. And these are areas on which to focus within the context of the guideline within which they are couched. So it's just a hierarchy. It's principle, it's guideline, and then it's checkpoint. But you also notice that there's tabs on the left. And you can also read them horizontally and vertically. And the point that I want to make with the framework that you're looking at now is that it's very active and that you're always moving students from providing a deep level of support in the access row and moving them through a process of being self-directed learners. So access is across that first row, across all of the principles. Recruiting interest, that falls on the teacher to understand their students and to create that environment for students to engage in. Representation in the access guideline is perception. The teacher is creating opportunities for students to perceive information in various ways. So this is your, from a student perspective, your input, how you're allowing students to perceive and understanding their environment and the instruction that you're providing. And then action and expression, it's physical action. It's a very concrete approach to connecting what students are being taught and interacting with their classrooms. Now, as we move to the build stage, now we're becoming partners. The teacher and the student is becoming partners in helping students to access and build on sustaining their effort and persistence. How students best continue to engage in situations that are difficult as opposed to giving up. Language and symbols. How are we interpreting or allowing students, providing students options to interpret language and symbols in their environment that they may not be familiar with? And multiple ways for students to express themselves. It might be offering students assistive technology, for example, or different ways to communicate as opposed to oral language all the time. And then here's where our self-directed learner row of guidelines happens, where we want students to then internalize what they have been taught, what have they been practicing, what have they failed at, what have they been successful. This is where students are learning about themselves and how to self-regulate when anxiety is high, when the activities become difficult. What are the strategies that they're able to access on their own? How do they comprehend? What do they need? How do they ask for what they need? How do they become self-advocates in saying, you know, I don't understand, I don't comprehend what is happening, what's being taught? Then how can I advocate for myself so that I can deepen my comprehension? And then with our executive functions are really the deepest level of expression and how we plan, how we prioritize, how we organize ourselves in order to move forward in meeting the goals that are set. And this guideline is actually directly related to the goals that we implement in our classrooms, and allowing students to independently figure out how they are going to meet that goal. And that's where we have concrete goals, but flexible means for meeting those goals. Okay, and the whole foundation of UDL is to create expert learners. Expert learners are purposeful, motivated, resourceful, knowledgeable, strategic, and goal-directed. It's not a student who is able to get A's or be successful at every activity. It's a student who really learned who they are because they were given the opportunity to choose different ways for learning. Their voice was heard. They were taught in environments that were built upon relationship, community, and belonging. So I just wanted to pause there. This is the transference of power in the classroom, from the teacher having ownership to transferring through the UDL framework to allow students to own the power and be self-directed. So I'm going to pause there because we could end right here, and this is really the basis of what I wanted you to leave with. Any questions, comments? Feel free to unmute yourself. Enter in the chat. Okay, I'm going to take your word for it. So now we're just going to look really quickly at the definition of an expert learner. And you'll notice that the expert learner characteristics are framed within each of the principles. The engagement principle focuses on purposeful and motivated learners, learners who can stay motivated, who can self-regulate. Representation is that they're resourceful and then they're knowledgeable about themselves and what their needs are in order to comprehend information. And then action expression. They're strategic in how they meet their goals, and they can't do that if they don't understand themselves, what they need, and how they learn best in organizing themselves in moving forward to achieving the goal that's been set for them. Okay. So this is your other resource. It's up on the Padlet. It's not a link, but the preschool learning foundations are actually grounded in universal design for learning. So what I've put here is the front matter, where it refers directly to universal design for learning in volume 1. And then I've color coded just in relationship to the UDL framework. So you'll see multiple means of representation. Everything is in purple or red. Multiple means of expression is blue, and multiple means of engagement is green. So I've highlighted in the framework where the principles all are referenced. Okay, so that's on the Padlet, but I did want to give you an example. We went through all of the foundations in volume 1, and then we color coded each one of them. So you'll see the example that's on the screen is from reading. Is children demonstrate an appreciation and enjoyment of reading and literature? You're probably familiar with this, but the actual foundations, you'll see read familiar books written in the home language or in English. So because it's reading, it's an input. It's the information that students are provided to understand information. That's the reading of the books. Now the SEL or the engagement component is when encouraged by others. Okay, that's keeping the student engaged. It's helping the student to continue to move forward with that encouragement, especially when the task gets difficult. And then the expression, the action and expression component is in the home language, they will talk about the books. So now what you have is you have the reading, which is the representation, you have the encouragement, which is the engagement, and you have the talk about the books, which is the expression. So this is how they've designed the framework to relate back to universal design for learning. And that resource is up on your Padlet, like I said, for you to download and utilize. Whether you're using the preschool planning tool, I would go there first. I would pick the foundation that you're going to focus on with your lesson plan. I would come over to this resource, and now it's broken down for you in a UDL frame. Okay. Questions, comments?
So I have a question. So this is already like that, or it was added?
It was added. So what our team
okay.
What our team did was create a UDL version of volume 1.
Oh, great.
Nice.
I love it. You know, the good thing about all of this is like finally we are integrating the social emotional part, and that makes me so happy because it's always so disconnected. And for me as a learner, I just learn when I have a good interaction with my teachers.
Mhm.
And finally, we're getting that together. So great.
We're trying to get it together. So I'm just going to go through each one of the principles. Probably be kind of quick, but we're going to focus first on engagement. It's all based on brain research. And the engagement is the affective network, and it's really in that limbic system. This is your fight or flight. So there's no ability for language in this part of the brain. It's all based on emotion and connection and relationship. And it influences students' behaviors and actions. So we started with that emotional versus cognitive piece. If we only focus on the cognitive, we're not going to open up space in the brain for students to learn. And then I just put in a couple comments about engagement in early education. Katie Novak in the video mentioned choice in her buffet analogy. We promote self-monitoring. We want to transfer that power to students monitoring themselves and regulating themselves. Solving problems that students experience is a critical component. And then we have to allow students and ensure students that their identities are reflected in the environment, their ethnicities, their race, their gender, etc. So that they have that connection with the environment in which they're learning, and it's focused in relationships. We've said this before, that learners will differ in the way that they become engaged, which is why we have to offer up the various ways for students to engage within their work. So some of the participants we've had in these trainings, they're like, what does this look like? So I've given you two opportunities within each of the principles. The first is just an example of a teacher who is focusing on engagement. And again, what you'll notice is you probably already do this, but what this does is put it within the context. You are doing these activities to engage the student, offering that flexibility and choice in an activity so that students are able to interact with that activity in the way that they choose to do that. So I'll just give you a second to read through the example. And for the student who likes cars and trucks, all students can utilize if they think that's fun. It's a way to keep all students engaged, even though you're planning for that specific student who has that specific interest. And I also have a video. Some of you learn better with a video. What I'd like you to do is think about engagement only. And we're going to see a preschool classroom. And Ms. Kangu is one of my favorites. I always wish that I was in her class. But I'm going to stop sharing. I'm going to go to the video. It's teacher channel, which is a channel that you have to subscribe to. So I couldn't embed it. All right. All right, so in the chat, what I'd like you to do when you notice strategies or the design of the classroom or the activities that are specifically focused on engagement, stick it in the chat. Okay, this is Ms. Kangu. We'll just watch it for about a minute.
Children learn in a variety of ways. Using activities that are hands-on help the child to get to learn easily and more as they are interacting using their senses. Next, Shamaya.
Oh man. Well, that's not good. Hang on. Try it again.
Children learn in a variety of ways. Using activities that are hands-on help the child to get to learn easily and more as they are interacting using their senses. Next, Shamaya. So there's physical movement which helps them as they're moving. There she got it. Using their cognitive skills as they're thinking and manipulating the objects and the manipulatives. I like what you're doing here. When they are speaking and singing, that's their language that is already being built up in their vocabulary. Because they are so big. Their interaction with others, that also builds up their social skills and also emotional skills. I got 20. Once you put all that together, it helps the child not only build in one domain of their development as a child, but it helps them to develop all as a holistic child. Starting from left to right, we're going to order those numbers from 0 to 10. Now, let's look at those numbers. Can we look at those numbers? What's the first number? Who can tell me the first number? Yes, Jordan. 0. The first number is 0. So may we have Imani go all the way next to Ramani. Good job. What's the second number? Who can tell us? Yes, Heaven.
Miss Kungo class, it is 1.
It is 1. Thank you for using that complete sentence. May we splash some fantasticness on Heaven? Let's go. Fantastic. Good job. Oh, they're going fishing. They're going fishing.
In the activity where the children got to fish, using their hands and using their fine motor skills, they're developing physically. They're
Did anybody notice any engagement strategies that kept the students involved and interested in what they were doing? And this would fall within that recruiting interest guideline at the very top, the access piece. Fantastic, Spray. It's fun, right? That is one of my favorites. Yeah, she made it fun. She made it interactive. You can tell that she had a relationship with her students. Any others you can put in the chat?
She helps and models activities.
Physical.
She used a lot of visuals.
The what?
Visuals.
A lot of visuals.
Visuals, yes. Yeah, so you all do that. It's just like putting it within that principle of engagement. And then we're going to look quickly again at, and that was engagement. And again, we're looking at developing expert learners. So when we focus on engagement, we're looking at students are eager for new learning. They're goal directed. They know how to set challenging learning goals for themselves. So these are all the areas that Ms. Kungu was working on within that engagement principle. It also relates to representation. So representation, again, is that input, and it happens in the temporal lobe. And this is how we gather facts, how we identify patterns. It's how we interpret information that is inputted within our environment, not just the writing on the wall, but also how we experience and interpret the behaviors, how we interpret relationships, etc. It's offering options in early education for visual, auditory input, various media alternatives for students to access, to choose from, and determine what helps them to comprehend information within their environment. We're looking at focusing on students' funds of knowledge. We're looking at asking ourselves, is the content meaningful to the students? Is it accessible? Are we providing processing time? Are there various resources for students to understand the language and symbols that they're presented with? And do we have a balance for all students to access? So here's another example. I'll give you a second to read through what a lesson or what planning would look like, specifically related to the principle of representation. It's around a storybook about shapes and offering students different way to access and comprehend the lesson goal that is identifying shapes. And you saw this in Ms. Kungu's classroom. She represented numbers in a variety of ways, but she has to have that concrete goal in order to design or offer multiple ways for students to access.
There's a couple of comments in the chat too, Kevin.
Let's see.
Many different ways to aboard numbers, giving opportunities to everyone to participate in the way that they feel more comfortable, lots of hands-on activities.
Perfect. Yep. And that's all for allowing students various ways to understand that choice component. So enter in the chat. What are some creative ways that you've represented information to increase accessibility and understanding for students to comprehend what you're teaching? And this is a perfect starting point for implementing universal design for learning, taking into account for what you already do. Because this is not new information. It's taking what you already do and then moving that forward within this context and then building upon it. And then if you'd like to watch Ms. Kungu again, I think it's I can create a video through Zoom if you'd like to see it again. But it's a good way with your staff that you can just use the video to make that connection within all three of the principles. And that was representation. And then again, we're looking at creating expert learners who consider their prior knowledge, who activate that prior knowledge, recognize tools and resources that would help them understand, and then how to transform that new information into meaningful or usable. Yes, Alicia, songs, games, painting. Students use all of their bodies, absolutely. And then finally, action and expression. Also, based on brain research, happens in the frontal lobes. And this is the higher order tasks in thinking around executive functioning. It's voluntary behavior. It's making choices on how we prioritize, organize, plan, etc. So this is the highest functioning component of the brains. And what that looks like in early education is allowing students various ways to express themselves. That they only access skills related to that lesson goal. Now, this is what we're going to talk about in our next presentation, is that when we lesson plan, creating that goal is the first step, and then allowing students to choose various ways that they're going to achieve that goal is how we activate those executive functioning. Give time for self-correcting, that allows for self-direction. Give prompts for self-correction, allow students to self-correct rather than hyper-mediating or solving the issue for the students. It's over-accommodating that we're trying to avoid. And then encourage creativity, encourage students to express themselves in the way that they express themselves. Are there options for creating that action? Options for communication and expression? Are students able to be self-directed? Are they able to self-monitor? Are they able to self-correct? And this is that transference of power and allowing students to make mistakes and then correct. And then executive functioning in preschool, actually in every grade level, needs to be explicitly taught. Another example, I'll give you a second to read through what choice in action and expression looks like within a specific activity. Think about ways that you already do this. Look on children, yes, Edgar, look on children's interests. And utilizing those interests as a strength that you can implement within your lesson planning, okay? And then Ms. Kangu, once again, different ways for students to express themselves within her lesson, and that's that flexibility. And what does expert learners look like in the action and expression principles? They formulate their own plans, devise effective strategies, organize resources and tools, monitor progress, recognizing their strengths, and abandon plans and strategies that are ineffective. These are all components or characteristics of an expert learner. Again, going back to self-direction, this is kind of the foundation of that. You also have this resource, which is really a toolkit that has every UDL tool at every different grade level. And you can access it, you can download it, but what it is it's a live binder, and there's a whole section, if you look over where my cursor is, there's a whole section for preschool. So when you open it up, you just scroll down, you click on Universal Design for Learning for Preschool, and it opens up all of these resources. Just added UDL early childhood crosswalk. So it's a crosswalk between the UDL guidelines and checkpoints with what then that would look like in preschool based on all of the principles. So this is also there for you. It's on your Padlet for you to access. Might be a really good idea just to take a few minutes and go through some of these resources. It stays live. And Fred Cochran, who created it out of San Joaquin County Office of Ed, keeps updating it. So it's always current, it's always relevant, and just full of amazing resources. So the last thing I'd like you to do is make your commitments. We went to this idea board last time, and you entered all of your whys. What I'd like you to do is go back to the idea board It's at this link that Diane will put in the chat. And then you click on where it says commitments. It'll open up a little post-it, and I'd like you to write your commitment to implementing UDL. What's something that you can do Monday morning that you learned about the framework today? And we'd just like you to put your goal or your commitment for implementation on the idea board.
So that link is in the chat right now.
Awesome. And when you've written it on your post-it that popped up, just click somewhere off the post-it and it will automatically upload. Hands-on activities. Oh, visualize their needs. Give ourselves permission to be creative in how we set up environments. Yes, make it fun. Based on observation, change materials inside, foster more self-directed play. These are good. I will go over the resources and try to understand better how I can use UDL to apply in my classroom. And be sure to be here. I think, Diane, it's February 11th.
Yes.
February 11th, we'll get into specifics in lesson planning and then how you can integrate the UDL framework into your lesson planning. Pay more attention to each children's learning and set activities to them. Nice. Environmental awareness.
Yeah.
One of my favorite quotes is, the environment is disabling, students aren't disabled. Be more flexible, engage more with children.
It's actually the 12th.
Is it the 12th?
Is it the 12th? Okay. Thank you for the correction on that.
I will create many invitations for children to self-direct their learning. Awesome. Self-direction is a theme today. All right, Diane, I think we covered the UDL framework. Anything else?
I think, no, what I would like to do is just get some verbal reactions to today's training from everyone, because this was really important information. I learned a lot, actually, Kevin. So if we can just open it up and let people just verbally give your opinions about what you learned today too. This is great. I love this particular idea of boards. It's just great. So does anyone want to have any comments? Julia said, thank you.
I just want to say, I really like the idea of creating self-directed learners. I think that's kind of like this focus of having that is really motivating me again. So thank you. Yeah.
Any other comments?
I have a comment. This is Mary. I just wanted to say thank you, and I feel like I learned something new every time we have these trainings, and I really appreciate it. Just like I just finished a class at Cabrillo. It was a curriculum class with Dana Cox, and she taught with, it was also had a social emotional part to it, it was, and so what I learned today is, you know, it's kind of like, oh, I learned that in class too. So it was really nice. And thank you so much. I really appreciate all, you know, all the material and the reading material too. Thank you.
My pleasure.
Well, I want to say thank you to Kevin. Great presentation. I really enjoy, and I enjoy to have so many resources to go over and use it. Thank you.
Thank you, Rosie.
I really enjoyed this presentation, and I feel like it really integrates well with Eckers and with class, and really looking at being able to be flexible and creative with the variety of modalities for learning, and in just opening yourself up more to that. So I enjoyed that. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thanks, Linda.
I want to say that the things that stand out for me, a lot of it, that is why, what, and how.
Simply put, Amy, yes. Yeah. Easy to remember. And there are quite a few comments in the chat too from everyone. Great information, great presentation. I'll remember to have a variety of dishes on the table. Very good. I thought that the analogy to a dinner was pretty universal for everyone, and that was just something that when I went through the training in Santa Clara, that was sort of the thing. And it's like that would be my first response, is to have a buffet, just because I've been in the classroom and I know that people have so many different needs. And so, but I think, you know, that again is just a really good reminder for all of us and everything that we do, you know, because this, as we look at universal design, you know, it's relatable to everything that you do in the context of your own personal life, as well as your teaching too, as well. So. Okay, any other comments? All righty, well, I have one before we log off. Can we go ahead and do full screen, Kevin?
You want me to stop recording?
With with gallery and there we go. So I thought that Rosalina in our little breakout group made a really good point. And her point is that, and so did Stacy too, you know, in those last 2 years, you guys have been grappling with what have your priorities been? Your priorities have been, because of the pandemic, your priorities have been to keep children safe, to keep yourself safe, to keep your staff safe, to keep parents safe, to keep your family safe. And so many times, you know, you're in survival mode this last year. And so what I really appreciated, Kevin, was that the time, an hour and a half to get this kind of information, is really so respectful of the times that we are currently experiencing. It's enough information, you know, because many times, as Stacey had said, you know, many of our instructors have been in the field for a long time. And so looking for new things that are going to spark a new way to, or a new system in which they can revitalize what they are already doing has really been sort of one of the key things here that I've seen, just in learning, relearning a lot of what you presented. And so I just want to, you know, recognize you all, because you've showed up every single day. You know, you've showed up, and I think we know, you know, how hard that is. And now it's time to take a break for all of us, and to take a deep breath and do some self-care and focus on your families and yourselves, and make sure that you're ready to go again for the new calendar year. And you know, on behalf, you know, like many of you are on our Monday morning meetings with Ferris, our great superintendent, and you know, he is so committed to everything that you are doing and wanting to make sure that you are hearing directly from him how important you are to the lives of the children that you're caring for and the families too. So remember that and enjoy yourselves and make sure that, you know, this break that you're taking also includes a lot of time to take care of yourself too. I just want to thank Kevin for being here this Saturday and for all of you too for showing up again. I know how hard it is, and we all want to spend our Saturdays doing something else, but you know what? You know, this is just another act of dedication on your part. So we really appreciate it. So have a wonderful weekend. And if, you know, if you can join us on Monday, we'll be sending out the link again to everyone, and we'll see you then on Monday. And then we'll all be ready for a wonderful break. So, and good luck in implementing some of the new strategies that Kevin has shared with you. It doesn't come out at a better time, Kevin. It really doesn't.
Yeah.
So really appreciate it. Thank you so much. And thank you all for joining us again. Take
Thanks,
care.
everybody. See you in February.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank
You're
you,
welcome.
Diana. Nice work.